Does therapy actually work? That's the big question. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. I'm going to share with you some of my experience of therapy and of counselling as well, and give you an idea of what it's all about, what the differences are, and give you an insight to my experience with them as well. Now, as a disclaimer, both counselling and therapy can work under very different circumstances and aren't always right for everyone. So what can work for one person might not work for another. So it's not bulletproof, and often they're best and most effective when you're using them alongside other types of treatment or support or lifestyle or well-being changes as well. So dieting, exercise, you may be taking medication of some kind. You may be seeking treatment elsewhere as well. So often it's more effective when it's not a standalone approach to dealing with issues that you might be having, and things that you're trying to work through in life. So, and that was my approach when I first started counselling, which is what I went in for. So that was last year now, and I think I did counselling maybe for 3 months, possibly 4 months total. And I saw a counsellor every week, and it was something that I paid for privately because it wasn't possible to get counselling quickly. That's one of the big issues in the UK, usually with the NHS. Unless you're kind of on death's door in some way, there's not a sense of urgency around these kind of therapeutic services, which can often mean that you're on a waiting list, and it might be 6 months before you hear anything, and even then you might only get so many weeks of treatment for free. It's very short term, unfortunately. So, and I felt I needed something that was going to be available for me whenever I needed it. So that was why I decided to pay for it. And I actually found a local charity that provided it, which meant that cost-wise, it was based on my annual salary. So, which just makes it that bit more affordable. So everyone pays a different amount depending on what they can afford in that kind of way. So I thought that was really a really nice approach, actually. And perhaps that's because they're a charity as well, that it makes them more accessible for all people in society. But I found I needed counselling in the first place because I was seeing my doctor quite regularly, but obviously as a medical professional, they can only say so much about the kind of psychology side of things and life experiences and your own history and trying to process experiences that I've had in life and what I was going through at the time. And the doctors only give you 10-15 minutes or so in an appointment anyway, so they're not really there to be a counsellor as such. And to be honest, I often got the sense I was overwhelming them when I started opening up. Like they didn't know which way to look, kind of thing. So, it wasn't quite the right environment for what I needed. So, and I was, being given medication at the time, which I'm still taking now. And I found that counselling would be a good kind of complement to that, so that I was doing something that I could try and tackle the kind of overwhelming thoughts with and the sort of experiences that I was going through. There was a way for me to talk about it with someone and help me to kind of process things a bit. So with counselling, I found it was initially very helpful because it meant I was able to have an outlet every week. And I did find that initially it was really helpful to have that, but it became very one-sided very quickly, where it felt more like a listening service, really. And I kind of found that over time that wasn't really what I needed. To begin with, it was fine because it just helped me to kind of get all my thoughts out of my head, which was good to be able to do that. But over time, I needed input as well. I needed direction. I needed guidance, and I needed to feel like I was on the wavelength with somebody that I was paying to be there with as well. So I found that counselling wasn't really the right kind of service for me, I suppose, which is why I then decided to look into therapy. So I did talk about this with my counsellor at the time, that I was having reservations about whether it was working for me or not. Not the easiest conversation to have with someone, even though you're paying for their time, but it felt right to do, because you do build up a kind of relationship with somebody over time when you're seeing them every week, and sharing kind of intimate parts of your life with them. So that was not an easy conversation to have, but it was a necessary one. And I did agree that it would be sensible to keep going with counselling until I found a therapist to move to. So that way there wasn't a period of time where there wasn't anybody there. And I found that was a useful thing. So I kind of hung on for a few weeks before I found a therapist. Therapy is more expensive, or it certainly can be. In theory, counsellors are trained professionals, but so are therapists. But in a broader sense, they're more specialised and more focused on particular aspects of life. And I was keen to find someone who had a background in depression, anxiety, dealing with family backgrounds, dealing with life stresses and work, and all the aspects that I felt kind of were key points in that made up my life, really, and helped me to deal with what I was experiencing at that time. So that was my approach to it. And I found, for me, given my lifestyle, that initially when I had counselling, it was important for me to be able to meet somebody in person. I felt like I needed that kind of almost human connection there, to be in the room with someone. So I was seeing somebody locally, but when it came to therapy, I felt that I was able to access therapists much more quickly by meeting people online rather than in person. There's not so many services in my local area. I didn't want to be able to have to travel far either. And seeing somebody online, I can meet with them on a much more available, that I can meet with them much more frequently, and at my convenience to some degree. So I decided to go the online route. And I found that most therapists offer that these days anyway, which was good. I felt, looking back, I felt fortunate that I was able to find a therapist for me that actually I found worked well for me, and we were on a wavelength, because it can take time to find the right kind of therapist for you. And that is something, if you do a little bit of research online, that is something that a lot of people say. Even medical professionals will tell you that as well. You do have to do a little bit of shopping sometimes and find the right kind of person. Have maybe a session or two with them before you realize if they're the right sort of fit for you. So I was fortunate, really, that I found that actually the therapist I had, I felt like they understood me, and we kind of connected, I suppose, quite quickly. So that gave me I suppose, a sense of loyalty there, and there was I felt a kinship with them, which I think was important for me as part of the service, I suppose. Um, Therapy is more expensive than counselling, or certainly I found that. And again, I went private with therapy because, again, going through the NHS, I'd be waiting a very long time to see somebody like that. And I wanted to see someone on an ongoing basis for as long as I felt I needed them. So that was important to me as well. I didn't really want to be constricted by having a certain number of sessions. So I was keen to make sure that that wasn't going to be like a problem for me in the back of my mind. So one of the big differences between counselling and therapy is, for me, I found counselling was much more of a listening service. It was much more passive. It was whatever I wanted to bring to the table each week and talk about. And they would ask the odd question here and there, but generally speaking, it was an opportunity for me to offload. And I didn't really get a lot in return. There wasn't really much to sort of take away. And I did find over time, I was starting to think about, what am I going to talk about this week? And racking my brains, that kind of thing. And that, I guess, for me was a sign that it wasn't it wasn't really what I needed, of the fact that I was sort of starting to worry about what I was going to talk about, even, that I was wasting their time, you know. Whereas with therapy, the therapist is much more probing, and they're interested in the relationships that you have, what you think about certain situations and experiences, and how situations make you feel and what's affecting you. And they often shared many techniques with me for me to try, and sometimes they set me homework, maybe to think about how I react in a situation or try out a certain technique. Um, there was a lot of opportunity to learn about how I was responding to different situations and reflect on my experiences, and also talk with different family members about my experiences as well, that became part of that experience with the therapist. So that was really, I guess, really helpful for me in a lot of ways. But also each week I had the opportunity to, reflect on how I was feeling, what I had going on, and think about some of the successes that I'd had, and also some of the challenges, and share those with my therapist. And it's definitely felt like quite a unique relationship, very different to anybody else, in my life. So that was, I found that really valuable. So, and I did feel that I progressed over time from the point when I started therapy to the point when I ended therapy. So I will say that I was seeing my therapist for, I would say, about 5 months or so, every week, sometimes twice a week, if I felt I needed it. And they were always very available generally, so that was really helpful as well. Fairly responsive, usually within like a day or two max. But I had to end therapy in the end for financial reasons. And it wasn't necessarily that it was too expensive, it was more about my own financial constraints. So that was a real shame to have to end therapy under those circumstances, really, because it didn't feel like it was a natural ending. It felt like a bit of an abrupt ending. But at the time, I felt like I was leaving therapy at a moment where I wasn't desperately relying on it, at least. I think it had been at least a couple of weeks since I'd seen my therapist anyway. And I mean, previously I'd almost had I had previously I'd had withdrawal symptoms from not seeing my therapist. Really, if I missed a week, I'd feel this sort of bottling up. experience, and I'd feel more anxious and more tense, and a sense of frustration, I suppose. Not with the therapist, but just day-to-day life. And the only thing I could put that down to was not having an opportunity to offload in the way I did with my therapist and talk through different situations. So, and often I found the conversations helped me to shift my perspective a bit and appreciate different aspects of life and recognize what success actually means as well, because that is very different for everybody. Like, we've all got a different version of success, and we can look to the big things in life, like a different job or buying a house or living somewhere you want to be or having a family, all those bigger pictures. But when you're seeing someone like a therapist, it really does bottle down to some of the small stuff on a day-to-day basis. You know, like a success for me would have been putting my hand up to ask a question at an event, taking a microphone, because I'm putting myself in the spotlight and I'm going outside my comfort zone and I'm doing something I wouldn't normally do. But to me, something like that is a big deal, when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to really not wanting to be seen. That's a big milestone moment. So experiences like that allowed me to, I guess, see that in a slightly different light in terms of how I was progressing with my depression and anxiety to, push through some of the darker times and get myself into a more positive space. And I don't think I would have recognized those kind of experiences in the same way without therapy. And I don't think I would have I certainly wouldn't have spoken about it in this type of way, the way that I'm doing now. And also, I don't think I would have had the same kind of drive, maybe. So there is certainly a confidence that can come through having a dialogue with someone like a therapist. Um, someone that knows you, gets you, and is very kind of tactfully helping you to become a stronger, better person, I suppose. So yeah, that was those kind of experiences for me were, looking back, were quite unique to my time with my therapist. So that was, yeah, that was a good thing. Um, I may have therapy again in the future if I can sort my financial challenges out. I do hope to return. I'm in touch with my therapist by email, and I'm hoping to revisit them in the future. So we shall see. I can't really say how long it's going to be, but I'm hoping it'll at least be, this year, within the next maybe 3 to 6 months or something would be good. I know when I started out having therapy, I wanted this to be something that was ongoing and not constrained by anything, because I'd not had therapy before, and I feel like there are certain experiences I've had in my life that I'd like to explore. So not just the here and now and what I've been going through, but different things in my life history as well. So which are things that I may get to in the future. So, but for now, the priority is my day-to-day existence, if you like, for want of a better phrase. So there is plenty of information available online on therapy and counselling as well. The NHS have their talking therapy, which provides access to counsellors and advice and guidance around your mental health and your well-being. And there's online webinars that you're able to join on a weekly basis, and different routes into extra support that can be really helpful for a lot of people. I tried some of the talking therapy myself in the early stages. I found it wasn't quite the right fit for me, for what I needed, but that's not to say it can't work for other people. I'll put a link to the NHS talking therapy in the description below, So if you've not come across it before, take a look and you'll find some of those resources I mentioned. I'd really love to hear from you as well. If you've had counselling or therapy, what's your experience been like? How's the process work for you? I think the more we share around this, the more we can help other people as well. So please drop a comment down below. That's enough for today. I hope you've learned something from this video if you've got this far, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye bye.